was going to put in an ethanol transload facility.
Was Greenville and Western Railway involved in that transaction?
Yes.
In what respect?
Greenville and Western Railroad initially optioned the property and transferred their option to B&B Properties.
You shared this $73,000 commission with Ms. Plummer, is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, Amy Plummer had listing on 2 properties near the Anderson County Airport at one point, did she not?
Yes, as I understand it.
And she had those listings since at least 2007?
Your Honor, I'm going to object based on relevance of what happened in 2007. They've repeatedly argued that the relevant time frame is from at some point in 2008 up until November of 2008. And now they want to go backwards to 2007 and some of the other, I believe it since we're going to object to go back to 2006.
We can get to those in a minute, Your Honor, but why don't I start from, I'm going to ask him about the bond issue in 2008, and it may demonstrate that what occurred in 2007 is relevant.
And Your Honor, the whole issue is how is that relevant to the severance of what happened in 2007, what happened prior to the primary in 2008, what happened prior to Mr. Hoskins' letter in September of 2008. At the time this legal controversy began, the earliest time that's in evidence that the legal controversy began is August of 2008. And so all of this stuff that happened in 2007 and backwards is not relevant, and it's outside the time frame.
I'll ask another question first, Your Honor, and I'll try that one again later and see if it is less objectionable. You voted on a bond issue to purchase those 2 properties, is that correct?
The bond issue was not specifically for those 2 properties. I voted on a bond issue for county improvements that could be used for a number of different things.
Part of the purpose of the bond issue, however, was to purchase those 2 properties specifically, correct?
At the time the bond purchase was voted on, the decision to purchase those 2 properties had not been made.
But the 2 properties were actually identified in the bond ordinance itself specifically.
I don't recall.
I'd like to hand the witness something to refresh.
You may approach the witness.
Mr. McAbee, did you vote on ordinance 2008-28?
Yes.
I would review my objection. This ordinance, the time period of it, first reading was May 6th of 2008, second reading was May 20th, third reading was June 3rd. The primaries happened in mid-June. The dispute arose prior to Mr. Preston's employment in August of 2008 at its earliest. And so again, the issue of how this is relevant to the severance that we are here at issue with today is the issue.
Your Honor, ultimately, the properties that are identified here were purchased by the county, and the closing occurred in September '08, very much in the relevant time frame. And the point that I'm trying to establish here with my questioning is actually the relationship that existed between Mr. McAbee, Ms. Plummer, and the benefits that were received as a result.
I'll overrule the objection. It's for the court to decide the weight of this testimony. Later on, I'll make those decisions. You may proceed.
Mr. McAbee, the 2008 projects that were intended to be, for which the bond issue 2008-28 is going to be used, actually included the properties near the Anderson Airport specifically that Ms. Plummer had a listing on, correct?
Yes.
And she had those listings at the time of the vote, correct?
Yes.
And you voted on the bond, this bond issue, you voted on this bond issue, correct?
Yes.
And in fact, you voted on it several times because there were 3 readings, correct?
Correct.
One on May 6, 2008,
Yes.
and May 20th was the second reading and public hearing. And
I'm assuming that you have the dates. I can't remember exactly from my memory.
I believe they're in the ordinance itself if you'd like to refer.
Yes, that appears to be correct.
And the third reading and actually the date of the bond was June the 3rd, 2008, correct?
Yes.
As a result of this ordinance, actually 3 properties were purchased, correct?
Correct.
The first 2 we've already discussed. They were, one was on Dobbins Bridge Road and the other on Scarborough Road, is that correct?
Yes.
And those are the 2 properties that Ms. Plummer had listings on?
Yes.
And for each of those purchases, she earned a commission of over $13,000, is that correct?
I don't know how much the commission was.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear your question. Who earned the commission?
Ms. Plummer.
Ms. Plummer earned it.
Yes.
Thank you.
The third property that was purchased was on Old Portman Road, correct?
Yes.
And that property was not listed by Ms. Plummer, but she received a referral fee, correct?
That's my understanding.
And the referral fee was also a little over $13,000, is that correct?
I don't know.
After that, on or about July 13th, you sought an ethics opinion as to whether it was a problem for the county to use the funds from the bond issue to purchase property in which she had a listing, is that correct?
That's correct.
May I approach, Your Honor?
You may.
I'm handing you what has been marked as previously admitted as Plaintiff's Exhibit 58. Is this the letter that you wrote to the Ethics Commission?
Yes, it is.
And in this letter, you say that Anderson County wishes to purchase property with the proceeds of this bond issue that the owners have listed for sale with another agent in the same office where I have my license. And you're referring to Ms. Plummer there, correct?
That's correct.
And she had an exclusive right to sale listing on the property, correct?
Correct.
When you actually voted on the bond, however, you knew that Ms. Plummer had the listing, is that correct?
I knew she had those properties listed.
But you did not mention that in your letter to the Ethics Commission, correct?
I did not.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
I'm going to give you Plaintiff's Exhibit 59 that has also been previously admitted. Is that the opinion that was issued by the Ethics Commission in response to your letter?
I'm sorry, what exhibit number did you say?
Sorry, Your Honor, it's 59.
50. I said 69. Thank you. Go ahead.
Is Plaintiff's Exhibit 59 the ethics opinion that was issued in response to your letter?
Yes, it is.
And the county ultimately did purchase those properties, correct?
That's correct.
Do you know when they closed?
I do not.
Are you not aware that the county closed on purchasing all 3 of those properties on or around September 2008?
I don't know the exact date, but that would sound right.
To your knowledge, has the county done anything with those properties?
I don't know.
So you acknowledged in your request for an ethics opinion that your relationship with Ms. Plummer was so close that you should recuse yourself from any matter that might affect her interests?
I requested an opinion from the Ethics Commission because an agent in my office, in the same office I was in, had a listing on his property that the county was interested in buying.
A business relationship?
Yes.
You and Amy Plummer did business together?
Yes.
You shared a real estate commission together, correct?
Yes.
And you actually sought additional business together?
Correct.
And during 2007 and 2008, you and Ms. Plummer took a number of out-of-town trips, correct?
Yes.
And you testified that the purpose of in your deposition last year, you testified that the purpose of those trips was economic development for the county.
Yes,
And the county reimbursed your expenses and Ms. Plummer's expenses for certain of those trips.
yes,
And Mr. Preston was aware of those trips and on occasion signed off on them, correct?
yes,
But the actual selection of which trips to take or which conferences to attend, that was yours, correct?
yes,
No one with the county directed that you attend specific conferences, correct?
no,
And Ms. Heather Jones never suggested that you attend any particular conferences, correct?
She and I would often talk about what might be good conferences to go to, what might be good events to go to, and what fit in with the overall plan of the county. But she never actually suggested a particular destination.
She never suggested a particular destination for you and Ms. Plummer to go.
Exactly.
And as you testified in your deposition, you're not aware of any economic activity that Anderson County has, that has resulted to the county from those trips, correct?
Not any sign announcements.
And in your deposition, you were actually not able to identify any other economic development advisory board members that engaged in such extensive travel.
I don't know of any at that time.
Mr. McAbee, to the best of your recollection, in April 2007, did you attend the Society for Automotive Engineers Conference?
Your Honor, I've got to renew my objection. Now we're going way back to 2007 about an automotive engineers conference.
Your Honor, I have about 6 trips to ask him about that occurred before the primary. Those are not the extent of all the trips he and Ms. Plummer did, but they are an example. And I'm going to ask him questions about each one. I have documents to refresh his recollection on the trips. The point is that there was a relationship, there was a benefit personally to Mr. McAbee and to his business partner from trips at the expense of the county with no clear result for the county.
And Your Honor, my argument back is what this has to do with the severance, because in order for Mr. Preston, which I think is what they want to intimate, that Mr. Preston was somehow influencing Mr. McAbee's vote on the severance, Mr. Preston would have to be the most pressured person around, because he had no clue who would win or lose the primary in June of 2008, back in 2007. So this is not relevant, Your Honor. We think that the purpose of it would be to embarrass the witness and to imply an improper relationship that did not exist. They have deposed Mr. McAbee, they've deposed Ms. Plummer, they've deposed Mr. Allison, and they have repeatedly inferred an improper relationship, and all of the parties have denied it. Your Honor, the purpose of this really is just to embarrass Mr. McAbee, and it's not relevant.
Your Honor, I can assure you that it is not my intent to embarrass Mr. McAbee, and I apologize if you so feel that way. But
Well, again, the question is relevance.
yes, Your Honor.
How does it tie into issues that
Your
are? And
Honor,
I'm having some difficulty when you go back as far as you're talking about going back.
I understand, Your Honor.
Especially when you folks object to the political atmosphere that existed at the time, them going into that. And so
Yes, Your Honor.
I've been somewhat liberal with them, I'll be somewhat liberal with you. We're rule consistent. But I will decide the relevance of it and the weight that it has myself when I make the appropriate decision. I have a little difficulty in this situation, but I'm going to let you go forward and see if you can tie it together.
I understand, Your Honor.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Mr. McAbee, do you remember in April of 2007 attending the Society for Automotive Engineers Conference in Detroit?
Yes,
And did you attend with Ms. Plummer?
yes,
And the county paid the expenses for that trip?
yes,
Did you take any other members of county council?
no,
Any other members of the Economic Development Advisory Board?
no,
And you didn't limit your expenditures to the county per diem limits, correct?
It's my understanding that the county per diem limits didn't apply economic development or elected official.
And no one in the county asked you to take that trip?
I discussed it with Heather Jones. She was unable to attend it, but it is an event that a lot of counties participate in.
Did you invite her to go with you?
Heather Jones?
Yes.
Yes.
Did you invite her to go with you to any other conferences?
I don't remember.
Did you make a formal report after that conference?
If you mean by formal, if you mean written, no. I met with Heather Jones and discussed what transpired.
Do you remember, did you travel to Chicago in June of 2007 to visit the CSX facility?
Yes.
And did the county pay the expenses for that trip?
Yes.
Did Ms. Plummer go with you?
Yes.
Did you take any other members of council? County
No.
council? How about any other members of the Economic Development Advisory Board?
No.
And you didn't limit your expenditures to the per diem limits?
No.
Did anyone in the county ask you to take this particular trip?
No.
And you can't point to any specific economic, concrete economic development benefit that flowed to Anderson County from this trip?
This was part of laying the groundwork for attracting an intermodal facility to Anderson County. The Norfolk Southern has said that one of their worst mistakes was closing their intermodal facility in Greenville. The State Department of Commerce wants an intermodal facility in the upstate of South Carolina. They're more interested in the Greer area. It would be better for Anderson if it were here.
But it's not here yet.
And not it's in Greer.
Did you travel to, did you make a formal report after that trip?
I don't recall.
And in June of 2007, did you travel to the RailX conference in Albany, New York?
That was not a conference.
Can you tell me about that trip?
That is a company in Albany, New York, RailX.
Right. And Ms. Plummer went with you on that trip?
Yes.
And the county paid your expenses?
Yes.
And her expenses?
Yes.
And did anyone ask you to go?
I don't think so, no.
Did you take anyone else with you?
No.
Can you point to any concrete economic benefit that the county received from this trip to RailX?
No, not yet.
And in September of 2007, you and Ms. Plummer attended the Rail Trends Conference in New York City, correct?
That's correct.
And the county paid your expenses
Yes.
and Ms. Plummer's expenses?
Yes.
And you didn't take any other members of county council or the advisory board, correct?
That's correct.
And you didn't limit your expenditures to per diem limits?
No.
And you can't point to any concrete economic development benefit the county has received from this trip, correct?
The county did get a visit out of that trip. Chris Mahowski, who's president of Railcar Leasing Company, came and visited a site in Anderson County and looked at a section of rail that the county owns. He was considering buying.
Did he buy it?
No.
In October, I'm sorry, going back to the 2007 trip to Rail Trends. I'm sorry, moving on. In October of 2007, you and Ms. Plummer traveled to Chicago and New York.
Yes.
What was the purpose of that trip?
To Chicago was to visit Archer Daniels Midland. They were looking to expand into the southeast, and we were hoping that they would consider Anderson County.
And did you take anyone else with you in that trip?
Yes.
And who was that?
Steve Hawkins.
And you had done business with Mr. Hawkins in the past?
Yes.
You and Ms. Plummer together?
Yes.
And did the county pay for his expenses as well?
Yes.
Did you all limit your expenditures to per diem limits on that trip?
No.
And no one in the county asked you to take this particular trip?
I don't recall. No, I don't think so.
And can you point to any concrete economic development benefit that resulted from this trip?
Well, no.
In April of 2008, you attended the Society of Automotive Engineers Conference in Detroit, just like the year prior, correct?
That's correct.
And again, you traveled with Ms. Plummer, correct?
Correct.
And the county paid your expenses and her expenses, correct?
Yes.
And you weren't limited to the per diem limits?
Correct.
And no one in the county asked you to take this particular trip?
We discussed this one with Heather Jones prior to going.
Just like you did the year prior?
Yes.
This was the one event that you discussed with her?
Yes. Yeah.
And you can't point to any concrete economic development benefit that's resulted from that trip?
We created some interest with a couple of companies, but no site visits.
Is it your opinion that economic development is forward-looking?
I don't understand what you mean.
Does it require follow-up to be effective?
Yes.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. McAbee, I'm handing you 3 exhibits. They have been previously admitted as plaintiff's exhibits 72, 73, and 74. Plaintiff's Exhibit 72, is that a registration form for the Rail Trends Conference in New York in September 30th through October 1st of 2008 that you attended with Ms. Plummer?
Yes.
And the front of that page shows that you were reimbursed by check for the registration fee, which looks like it was $1,195. Is that correct?
Yes. I would assume that's.
Did you pay that fee twice, once for you and once for Ms. Plummer?
I don't understand.
The registration single rate on this registration form is $1,195.
Right.
Did you pay that amount? Did the county reimburse you for that times 1 for yourself or for Ms. Plummer as well?
Which year is this?
This is September 30th through October 1st, 2008.
I don't remember if the county paid for both our registrations or not.
At this point in time, you had already lost the primary, correct?
That's correct.
And it was your idea for you and Ms. Plummer to go to this conference?
Yes.
And the county reimbursed you both for your expenses, correct?
I don't know if they reimbursed Ms. Plummer's expenses or just mine.
You ended up getting a check for $2,606.90, correct?
That's correct.
If you look at Plaintiff's Exhibit 73, is that a reflection of your expenses from that trip?
Yes.
Does that include some of Mrs. Plummer's expenses?
I don't know.
Did Mr. Preston sign off on the reimbursement expenses for this trip?
I would assume so.
If you'll turn to Plaintiff's Exhibit 74. And if you look in the upper right-hand corner,
Your Honor, I'm going to object. That contains hearsay.
this is a previously admitted exhibit.
I understand. But you're asking Mr. McAbee about what someone else wrote regarding the conversation with Mr. Preston, and even though the exhibit is in evidence, you're asking Mr. McAbee to testify about it with hearsay.
I'll ask some questions to try to avoid the issue, Your Honor.
Well, I'm gonna let you ask questions about it, since I don't know whether that's his note or someone else's note, how it came about, so I'll let you explore it more fully, and you reserve your right to object for your time. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. McAbee, do you recognize the handwriting on that reimbursement?
No.
Did you restrict yourself to the per diem limits and requesting reimbursement for this trip?
No, I don't think so.
Were you questioned about whether or not it's appropriate